Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel, and today we're doing a VCT EMEA season preview for the team Navi. Navi is a team comprised of members of the FPX roster from 2022. That organization now has a team in the China League, so Navi picked up the roster after they were dropped. And that roster won a championship in Masters Copenhagen, and they got pretty close in Champions 2022 as well, so the hope coming into 2023 was that they were able to repeat that success. And while they got close at times, they definitely had some inconsistencies throughout the year, and with Ardiis leaving to go to North America with CNED coming in, there was definitely some chemistry issues about this roster. But now Ardiis has returned, CNED has left, so they have the exact same roster as they had in 2022. I don't know if that's the only roster that has stayed exactly the same since 2022. It might be, I'm not sure, but either way, they won in 2022 and they're hoping that they can win in 2024. Looking at the 2023 placements, there are some good placements here, but ones that are definitely concerning. Starting with Lock-In, they were top 4, they placed 3rd to 4th. Then entering the EMEA regular season, it looked like this team was going to be one of the top teams, and they were, but I'm sure their fans was expecting a bit more out of them because they ended up placing 4th, losing to Foot in the playoffs. Thankfully, that's all they needed to get into Tokyo, and in Tokyo, they had an underwhelming performance of 11th to 12th. And every other EMEA team that attended Tokyo didn't have to go through LCQ, but unfortunately because of their placement, Navi did. And in that LCQ, they placed 2nd, so they didn't even win in the grand finals. In the other leagues, that would have knocked them out, but since EMEA had an extra spot because of Fnatic's win, they qualify. So they go to Champions and they have yet another underwhelming performance of 9th to 12th. So I'm pretty sure they're the team that attended the most tournaments throughout the entire year. They went through every single stage that a team possibly could, and 2 times they only qualified for the international tournament because of Fnatic winning. So that's a funny little thing there. So they definitely came in with high expectations. I think fans were expecting more, commentators alike, and it just didn't seem to work as well with CNED in there in place of Ardiis. Ardiis also struggled on energy, so it seemed like him coming back just made a lot of sense, and hopefully for this team, they're able to find that chemistry that they had in 2022. For championships won, again, this is the organization, they've won 0. The players, the roster, they have won 1 before, so if they do win 1, you can count that as this team winning a second one, but in terms of the org, it would just be 1. But currently, they do not have any. And for the 2023 MVP, I picked Xiao. He has the best stats out of all of them. He performed really well. It didn't really seem to matter what character, what role he played. He was just always doing well. And now we're going to move on to the stats of each player in the VCT in 2023. Starting with their IGL in Angel, he had 819 kills, 1,011 deaths, 439 assists for key ratio of 0.81. He played whatever character he needed to fill. It was Omen, Cypher, Sova, Gecko, KO, and Brimstone. So mostly Initiator there with some smokes and Sentinel thrown in as well. Angel's able to play the flexible role. You're not really looking for him to put up a lot of kills. You're looking for him to be the leader of the team, the IGL of the team, and he's done a great job so far. And honestly, they probably got as far as they did even with their underwhelming performances, probably because of his solid IGLing. Moving on to Xiao, he had 925 kills, 803 deaths, 432 assists for KD ratio of 1.15. This man played nearly every character under the sun. God, I had such an annoying time putting together the characters that this guy played. He played Fade, Sage, Omen, Astra, Killjoy, Brimstone, Sova, and Sky. So just whatever role needed to be filled. He was the flex guy. He could play Initiator, he could play Sentinel, he could play Smokes. It doesn't matter. Xiao's a good player. He can figure it out. He's a good example of what you want your flex player to be, a guy that can play a lot of different roles, a guy that can just fill in whenever he's needed, and it seemed to work out in his favor. He's able to play a lot of roles. I don't see any duelist on there, but also I don't think they ever needed him for that, so it doesn't really matter. Moving on to Zippin, he had 935 kills, 940 deaths, 500 assists for a key ratio of 0.99. Throughout the year, he played Raze, KO, Breach, Fade, and Sky, so mainly Initiator, but playing Raze when needed. Ideally, you probably want him to stick to that Initiator role and not have to play Duelist, but that might be something that we see happen more often if they ever want to play a Duelist combo. Moving on to Sugetsu, he had 967 kills, 852 deaths, 283 assists for a key ratio of 1.13. He played Killjoy, Viper, and Cypher, so Sentinel right there, but also able to fill smokes when it's needed. I don't really see a player that really specializes in the smokes role, so that is one thing I do see in the roster that is kind of a weak point. While they do have some good chemistry together and they're able to swap roles a lot, it doesn't seem like they have a player that is really just solely focused on the smokes. It's not something that's super necessary to be a successful team, but it definitely helps when you have a top controller, and it doesn't really seem like this roster has that. Moving on to Ardiis, he definitely struggled during his time at Energy. He had 1,083 kills, not bad numbers there. 1,006 deaths, definitely you want that number to be lower, but if you're trading, it's not that big of a deal, but it didn't really seem like that was why he was dying so much. 332 assists for KD ratio of 1.07. You definitely would like that to be higher. It's not a terrible number, especially for a duelist player, but I think the main problem why it's not higher is because he had to fill in for these other roles that he didn't necessarily fit on. When he was on Jet and Raze, he was performing well. Chamber too, he's not terrible on, but Chambers is not very good right now, but he played Sage and he played Killjoy, and it just didn't seem to work when he was on those characters. Not that he's terrible at them or anything, but it just felt like Energy wasn't making sure that he's playing to his strength. They just tried to deploy him in a way that just didn't seem to work. But now that he's back with the team that knows him very well, that knows how he plays, knows how he could be successful, maybe we see less of that. That would be my guess. If Ardiis can just focus on being a duelist player, I think whatever team he's on is in a much better spot than if he has to play these other roles. So a solid roster overall. This is a roster that has won a tournament before, so can they do it again? I think it's possible, but I also think that they're maybe a bit behind in some parts of roster construction. Again, I don't see a player that is like specifically very good on smokes. I see players that can do it, that can be successful at it, but do I really see anybody that is at the same level as, Marved was when he was on Optic? I just don't see it. They do have a lot of players that can play Initiator, some Sentinel here and there, so those roles are figured out, I think. But in terms of like Duelist, hopefully Ardiis can have a bounce back season. I think he will on this team. I think he will perform better being in a more comfortable environment. But I think if this team is going to be successful, we're going to have to see the character list for some of these players get a lot shorter, because there's just, I know that Xiao's good on a lot of roles, but do you really need one man playing this many roles? It's kind of crazy, but hey, if it works, then it works, but it didn't really work for them because they didn't go far. Looking at their maps, their best maps were Pearl. They had an 8-1 record on it, 60% on attack, 60% on defense. Fracture, they had a 6-2 record on attack with 60%, defense was 51. So both of their best maps are no longer in the map pool, so they're definitely going to have to find maps that can replace those as their best too. Moving on to their worst maps, there definitely were maps that they struggled on, mainly Bind. They had a 2-5 record on it, attack was 41%, defense was 56%. Lotus, not as bad, but still not ideal. 5-8 record on it, attack was 55%, defense was 39%. So they had a decent map pool overall. It wasn't anything atrocious. They had maps that they were good on, they had maps that they were bad on. It was kind of a standard map pool that you can see. If they're able to figure out some of the kinks that kept them from winning on certain maps like Bind and Lotus, then they should be in a better spot. But if they can't figure out Lotus, they're definitely going to get counterpicked to that map a lot, so they have to be careful. Overall, I think this is a really good team. I don't know if I see them winning a championship. I think them being 4th in EMEA last year was definitely, that's not what they wanted to be. That's not where they wanted to be. But Foot Esports, they came in and kind of took over that 3rd place spot. Most people expected them to be probably 2nd in EMEA, right behind Fnatic, but Liquid kind of took that spot, and then Foot kind of took the 3rd place spot because Foot played very well and they actually beat Navi. So there definitely is still concerns I have about Navi. With Ardiis coming in, I don't know if that fixes all their problems, but it definitely helps because they have, a core, a roster there that they're familiar with, that they're all comfortable with, so that should work in their favor, and that should mean that they're going to get a lot of wins. Do I see them winning a tournament this year? I don't know. I just think EMEA is very strong right now, and, do they beat the top teams in Americas? Maybe the Pacific teams. But overall, there's a lot of kinks that they still have to figure out, so we'll see how they do. Let me know in the comments down below, how do you think Navi is going to do in 2024? Will they succeed? Will they win another tournament as this roster, or will they fall short yet again? Please click like if you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!